Mom gave me this. She told me to let you read it when you're all alone.
My 8-year-old granddaughter offered me a small booklet, the size of her hand. My daughter collapsed suddenly a week ago and remains bedridden and has not woken up. The doctors say that the symptoms are unexplained and there is nothing they can do.
Mom told me yesterday. She said it had been hidden under the bed in our house.
My granddaughter, who has had a mysterious power since she was a little girl, sometimes uttered unexpected words. And those words were definitely true. I immediately checked the contents of my daughter's booklet. No way. Then, I found a horrifying story that made my hair stand on end. My name is Ari and I am 65 years old. I have lived alone since my husband passed away 15 years ago, but I have never felt lonely. This was because my daughter and her husband and granddaughter live in an apartment 10 minutes away from my house by car, and I saw them often. Cindy and her husband Dan are both 37 years old. They are both nurses working at the same hospital and got married 10 years ago after an office romance. 2 years later, their granddaughter Anne was born, and she had a strange power that most people do not have.
And has a special power that is different from other children.
The daughter who said this told me that my granddaughter could hear voices that no normal person should be able to hear. I did not want to doubt my daughter, but I could not easily believe something unscientific. At first, I thought it must have been just a coincidence or a misunderstanding on my daughter's part. It was when my granddaughter was 5 years old that I witnessed its power. It was when I went with her to visit the grave of my husband who had passed away in an accident. As I was offering my husband's favorite roses, my granddaughter said, "That's not right." She shook her head.
Grandpa wants to see carnations.
My husband loved carnations as much as roses before he died, but I had never mentioned it to my granddaughter. I froze for a moment in surprise. "Oh, and who told you what Grandpa's favorite flower was?"
Grandpa just told me that he's not in the mood for roses today.
She pointed to my husband's grave, and I stared at her in amazement. At the time I was still half convinced of my granddaughter's power, but then something happened a short time later that forced me to believe in her power. It happened when I went to the supermarket with my daughter and granddaughter. As we passed by a pregnant woman shopping, my granddaughter suddenly turned around and shouted loudly,
"Wait! Your baby is in pain and crying. Go to the hospital right away."
My granddaughter stopped by our neighbor, a woman who was also familiar with my daughter. She was standing there with a blank look on her face, and my granddaughter pleaded with her to hurry. Then, the daughter rushed to them and said,
"Thinking you've been tricked, will you go to the hospital with me now?"
and started rushing her. I thought she was going to scold my granddaughter for saying something outrageous, but I could not hide my surprise. "Hey Cindy, don't you think you're overreacting?"
No, it's not, because if Anne is pleading so hard, there's definitely something going on.
Then my daughter took some time and somehow convinced the woman. When they went with her to her OB/GYN clinic, they discovered that the umbilical cord was entangled in the baby's neck. The woman had to have an emergency C-section and was able to deliver the baby safely. If she had left it alone, the baby's life would have been in danger, and she and her family were very grateful for my granddaughter. Since then, I have come to believe in Anne's magical powers. However, my daughter asked me to keep this a family secret and I did not tell anyone. And that mysterious power would later cause a terrible tragedy. It all started one fine holiday. It was when my daughter came to visit my house with my granddaughter.
"I brought cookies for you."
Wow, thank you. Are they by any chance ends homemade?
I made them with my mom. Hey, Mom.
My granddaughter asked, smiling, but my daughter did not respond. And looked up at Cindy, who did not respond, with a curious look on her face, and asked again,
Mom?
She looked up at Cindy again with a curious look on her face and replied,
Yes, I guess so.
She replied. I wondered what was wrong with her. It was not like Cindy. I felt uncomfortable that my daughter, who usually expresses her love for her child to the best of her ability, was being so curt with her. She continued to act strangely after that, and no matter what I tried to say to her, all she would say was, well, or yeah, as if she was not in the right place at all. I sensed that something was wrong with my daughter. I asked her, Hey, are you okay? If you have any problems or concerns, just tell me. My daughter seemed lost for a while, but then she opened her mouth with a troubled look on her face.
Actually, Dan and I had a fight.
It was the night before that day. My son-in-law, who had seen a program about a child with psychic powers, suddenly said,
Let's use Anne's powers to make money.
The daughter said,
If she has this power, she'll pull out the TV. If she has this power, she'll be all over TV. He's all excited about how he's going to become a billionaire.
Hearing my daughter sigh in exasperation as she spoke, I frowned. It was obvious that if I did that, my granddaughter would be exposed to the world, and I couldn't very well agree to that. Treating Anne like a money-making tool is absolutely wrong. My daughter nodded her head and said, I understand, as I strongly pleaded with her. She thought it was up to Anne herself to decide when she was older whether or not she wanted to make her magical powers known to the public. I agreed with her and was relieved that Cindy had some common sense in her thinking. Have you told Dan how you feel?
Yes, but he didn't seem too convinced.
She really still wanted to discuss it, but her granddaughter, who had been sleeping, woke up and the conversation became moot. I was even angry at my son-in-law, but my daughter said she would not question him any further now.
We were just talking the other day about how we want to build a house soon, and I think he's just temporarily feeling more comfortable with money.
My daughter defends Dan by saying so. If Cindy, his wife, is like that, it is not for me to say. I decided to trust my daughter's judgment that my son-in-law's comment was a temporary distraction. A few days later, something unforgivable happened that I could not think of in that way. That day I was at a big park with my daughter, her husband, and my granddaughter. I was concerned about my son-in-law, but I was relieved that it was an unnecessary worry, as both my granddaughter and daughter were treating each other as usual and enjoying themselves as a family. However, that was a big mistake. The moment my daughter left my granddaughter's side to go to the bathroom, my son-in-law took her to the square where there was a street performance. As I followed him, wondering what was going on, my son-in-law suddenly picked up my granddaughter in his arms and lifted her as high as he could. Then, he took an extraordinary action.
This kid has a mysterious power. She can hear the baby in her mother's belly.
Showing and held up high to the people around her, the son-in-law shouted out loud while moving in a circle around her. I was so surprised that my son-in-law started to do something so strange that I froze for a moment, but I immediately grabbed his arm to stop him. Hey, stop it!
It's none of your business. Don't interrupt me.
He didn't listen at all and shook my hand off.
This kid is the child of God.
He raised his voice even higher. Families and elderly couples walking in the park were glancing at us as if they were looking at something strange. I was rapidly becoming impatient, and just as I was about to do something to stop them, My daughter came dashing back when she heard my son-in-law yelling.
What are you doing? Put it down right now.
My daughter stormed at my son-in-law with great force. Overwhelmed by Cindy's anger, the son-in-law reluctantly put down his granddaughter. My granddaughter, who had been held in his arms forcibly and roughly pushed around, was on the verge of tears.
Anne, are you okay?
That was scary.
My daughter stared at my son-in-law with a stern face as she hugged my granddaughter with tears filling her eyes. However, my son-in-law turned away and pretended not to know. Cindy knew she couldn't go on like this, and when Anne calmed down, she said,
I'll talk to him for a minute.
And left the place. While we were waiting for them, my granddaughter and I decided to go to a place with a lot of playground equipment and play. At first, my granddaughter still looked a little frightened, but as we played together, she regained her energy, which was a relief. A short time later, it was only my daughter who returned to us. She told me that her son-in-law had left sulking after an argument with Cindy. While I was listening to her story, I noticed a fresh scrape on my daughter's elbow. What happened to that injury?
Actually, Dan got mad and pushed me.
Really? Are you okay?
I'm fine, and we'll talk about Anne when we get home, so don't worry.
I told my granddaughter not to worry. Dad went to work suddenly. After that, just the three of us played together until the sun went down. To be honest, I was full of anxiety. I wanted to call my son-in-law and say something to him, but I thought he would feel bad if I, his mother-in-law, spoke out of turn, so I decided not to say anything. A few days later, I received a sudden call from my son-in-law. Shockingly, he informed me that our daughter had collapsed and was unconscious. She was perfectly fine when we last met. Why? Our daughter had been transported to the hospital where Dan worked, and I hurried there. Despite various tests, the cause of her collapse remained unknown, and she continued to sleep without waking up. I visited her every day, and during one of those visits, I encountered my son-in-law, who had been checking on our daughter's condition between work hours. I had taken comfort in the fact that he cared about our daughter even after our arguments, but later, I would discover that this was a significant misunderstanding. A week after our daughter collapsed, a significant event occurred. Our granddaughter, who had been visiting with us during our daughter's hospital stay, discreetly handed me a booklet.
Grandma, take a look at this.
She whispered. She glanced around, ensuring no one was nearby, and seemed quite cautious. What's this?
It's from Mom. She said you should read it when you're alone.
Our granddaughter explained. But when did she give this to you?
Yesterday. Mom told me it's hidden under the bed at home.
Yesterday, our daughter was already in a coma. Our granddaughter claimed she heard Cindy's voice using her mysterious ability. Perhaps it's akin to a sixth sense. As soon as I picked up the booklet, I felt a shiver run down my spine. No way. Fearfully, I opened the booklet and found something terrible written in it. Immediately, I became suspicious of my daughter's sudden collapse, and examined her body, which was still asleep. I looked at her head, face, and body in order, but there was nothing unusual. However, just to be sure, I took off her underwear and found something extraordinary. Unable to stand still, I immediately went to my daughter's house with Anne. We entered the house with my granddaughter's duplicate key and decided to thoroughly inspect the inside. I noticed a laptop computer on a desk in the corner of the living room. Curious, I decided to take a look at it, but it was locked.
Grandma, look behind the desk.
My granddaughter said to me as I was at a loss. I looked behind the desk as she told me, and found a piece of paper with a PIN number written on it. A few days earlier, she had dropped her pencil under the desk while doing her homework and found the paper by accident. I can't believe he keeps track of his passwords this way. My son-in-law must have changed his password so often that he could not remember it himself. So much so that there is something in here that should not be seen by others. Fearfully, I typed in the numbers on the paper, and the computer started up. As I carefully looked at its contents one by one, I discovered something unimaginable in a file at the edge of the screen. Oh no! What is this? The moment I saw it, I made up my mind that I would definitely grab the tail of the culprit who put my daughter in that state. And after executing one of my plans, I arranged for Cindy to be transferred to another hospital. Then that night, my son-in-law came over to my house in a great hurry.
Why did you transfer Cindy to another hospital?
He was so angry that he shouted at the top of his lungs, not caring about the neighbor's eyes even though he was on our doorstep. I thought it was the right thing to do, so I discussed it with her doctor and decided to do it. When I replied nonchalantly, his son-in-law raised his voice.
Don't do anything selfish.
My son-in-law raised his voice.
I brought her all the way to the hospital where I work because I wanted to be close by and talk to her every day.
The son-in-law lowered his eyebrows in an exaggerated manner and mumbled with a look that said he was worried about his daughter. I was so disgusted by his expression that I couldn't contain myself and stormed over to him the next moment. No way! You tried to send Cindy to the other side of the world.
What? What are you talking about all of a sudden?
After a moment of wide-eyed impatience, I silently offered something to my son-in-law, who immediately turned red and became angry. It was my daughter's booklet that I had secretly received from my granddaughter. The first part of the diary was a bland one, but after a certain day, it became all about my son-in-law. Just from the day you said you wanted to use and as a money-making tool. The daughter's diary said,
Dan has been acting strange since we had the fight about Anne. He has become unfriendly and cold. Dan seems to be sneaking around on the computer looking up things. I can't help but feel uneasy.
This is just a small part of the story, but I could see how my daughter was growing more anxious and distressed as the days went by. When I think of Cindy at this time, it is heartbreaking. However, in direct contrast to me, my son-in-law expressed his displeasure.
I didn't behave that way. It's just my wife's self-serving assumption.
The son-in-law looked annoyed and said, but such an excuse would not work. But such an excuse was not going to cut it, because on a page further down in the booklet something terrible was written. Then what do you mean by this sentence? Something like a syringe needle had fallen out, then I questioned him about it. He acted suspiciously.
Eh?
The son-in-law clearly looks upset. I read this section of the booklet and knew I had to do a thorough search of my daughter's house. And as a result, I found something extraordinary. What is this thing I found in your room? I confronted my son-in-law with a notebook with the word plan written on the cover. This notebook was filled with instructions on how to send my daughter to the other side of the world. When I showed it to my son-in-law, he broke out in a sweat on his forehead and said in a hoarse voice,
That's not mine.
He shouted at the top of his voice. It was obvious that he was in a great hurry, and no matter how much he denied it, it sounded like he was saying, It's mine.
Why would I want Cindy gone?
Oh my God, why?
I love her, and there would be no reason for me to do that in the first place.
It was obvious that what he was saying was a lie. because he had more than enough reasons to want to bury my daughter. I had heard from my granddaughter that they had had a rather heated marital argument shortly before Cindy's collapse. They were at odds over N's mysterious powers, no matter how many times my daughter tried to convince my son-in-law.
I'm going to use N as a tool of my business and become a millionaire.
And he did not listen to her. She was against it and would never break, so you decided to take her in your hands, didn't you?
And made up that story on her own. I bet she made up that plan as a prank too.
How could an 8-year-old kid plan something like this? Besides, I found syringe marks on Cindy's body. How are you going to explain this? When I examined every inch of my daughter's body as she lay in her hospital room, I found something extraordinary. It was the injection marks. What's more, that's not all I found. When I found the computer at my daughter's house, I checked his online purchase history and found evidence of large quantities of nuts, chemicals, and syringes. Those nuts are used as a spice in cooking, but in large doses they can cause drowsiness. My son-in-law mixed a large amount of it in her food, put my daughter to sleep, and had her rushed to the hospital where he worked. Since it was the hospital where he worked, it was easy for him to secretly falsify the results of various tests. Since his daughter and son-in-law have the same blood type, he exchanged Cindy's blood with his own that he had originally prepared. In this way, after hospitalizing his daughter, he kept putting her to sleep with this and that, and tried to extinguish Cindy's life by injecting drugs little by little with a syringe. All these plans were written down in the notebook.
I don't know anything. Please don't make me the bad guy when you have no proof that the notebook is mine.
He was still trying to keep his mouth shut at this point, but we still had a trump card left. Well, I'll show you the definitive proof. As soon as I played back the recording, his face turned blue and his stubborn attitude turned into a panic.
Oh my God. Why is this thing on there?
I showed my son-in-law a video that showed him in the hospital room putting something into my daughter's IV. Upon seeing the booklet and the plan, I was convinced that my son-in-law was trying to make Cindy disappear, and I immediately set up a small hidden camera in my daughter's hospital room. I made that footage available to my phone in real time and checked the video every 10 minutes. Then, a few hours after setting up the camera, I was able to record the decisive moment.
This was just the injection of a drug that the doctor had ordered.
There is no use in telling such a lie. Immediately after I saw this video, I asked the doctor to retrieve the IV and analyze the ingredients inside. As a result, I found out that it was mixed with a dangerous chemical that the hospital did not have. Then, having perfectly caught my son-in-law at the scene of the crime, I immediately transferred Cindy to a different hospital. Now there will be no more excuses.
Damn. I shouldn't have injected her IV just because it was too much trouble to take off her clothes.
Throwing himself down, the son-in-law spat that out, then scratched his head and kicked the front door with all his might. You mean to say that you admit that you did all this?
Oh, no, no. It's wrong. Not at all.
Although he became impatient at his own careless remark, he could think of no excuse and just kept repeating the same words. However, no matter how much he tries to talk his way out of it now, it is futile. I have already filed a damage report and submitted these evidences to the police, so an investigation should have started by now. You will be arrested soon. The son-in-law, with a look of despair on his face as he realized that there was nothing left for him to do, made a series of exaggerated apologies to show for it.
Please forgive me. How can I make it right for you to forgive me?
I looked down at him with cold eyes, having no intention of forgiving him when he did that.
I won't use it as a business tool anymore, and I will take good care of Cindy too. Please withdraw the damage report.
Even after saying this, my son-in-law kept making excuses, apologizing, and jumbled up his words. However, none of his words touched my heart, and on the contrary, only my discomfort grew. "You're depressing me, so I want you to leave." I coldly pushed away my son-in-law who was clinging to me, and his face looked as if it was the end of the world.
Wait.
I pushed him, who was still trying to say something, out of the doorway, and with my arms full of disgust for him, I vigorously closed the door. Shortly thereafter, my son-in-law was arrested and Cindy and he divorced. My daughter has retained an attorney and is suing him for a total of $70,000 in alimony and child support. What he did was deemed so malicious that he will not be able to come out from behind bars for a while. My daughter woke up soon after being transferred to the new hospital, and she recovered quickly and is now completely healthy. Now I live with my granddaughter and the three of us live together in peace.
What did you think of this story? Please subscribe to our channel. See you in the next video.
It has been about a year since my daughter started living on her own as a university student. Despite receiving a considerable amount of money from me every month and working hard at her part-time job, she came back looking thin and frail. "Aren't you overdoing it a bit? Are you eating properly?" I asked her.
I'm eating properly. Bean soup and such.
She replied. "And such?" I prompted her to continue, but she fell silent. As if to confirm my uneasy feeling, she said,
Thank you for the $13 every month, Mom.
I couldn't believe my ears. $13? I send you $130 every month. My name is Nancy. I've been told all my life that I don't have good judgment when it comes to men. I had my first boyfriend when I was a university student. I dated a guy who was 2 years older, but less than 3 months into the relationship, I discovered he was cheating on me. Disillusioned with older men, I then dated a younger guy. But he eventually became something of a freeloader, perhaps because I paid for everything, because I was older. I thought I had found the right one when I got married after 4 years of dating, but he turned out to have both a spending problem and a habit of cheating. After divorcing him, I've spent the past 10 years raising my daughter Emma as a single mother. The little, innocent girl I once knew had grown into a dependable daughter who took the initiative to do household chores. You don't have to push yourself so hard, I tell her, but she insists.
Mom, you're working so hard. If you overdo it, you'll collapse.
On the other hand, Emma never slacked off with her studies.
I want to work hard like you, Mom. I don't want to be a burden to you,
she said, and ever since she started high school, she had been studying for the entrance exams to a national university. Though she sometimes made mistakes, I thought she was an excellent daughter. After intense studying, Emma finally passed the entrance exam to a certain national university. When we went to see the results together, we found her exam number on the bulletin board and rejoiced together, holding hands. The time until her university enrollment flew by. I took some vacation days, and we went on a celebratory trip, which was really enjoyable. Soaking up to her shoulders in the warm water of the spa, Emma said,
Mom, it's so warm.
With rosy cheeks, and I felt a deep affection for her. I vowed to myself that no matter what happened, I would protect my daughter. With her university entrance, my daughter left our home. I saw her off with a mixture of pride in how well she had grown and a touch of sadness. After Emma started living on her own, it became our routine to talk on the phone before bed. Emma was already good at household chores and more responsible than most her age. I wasn't too worried about her day-to-day life, but the fact that she was a young woman living alone did leave me with some lingering concerns. Sometimes I wondered if I was being overprotective, but since Emma always seemed happy to talk every night, those post-work calls became a cherished part of my day. Emma shared many stories with me, about her university classes, the new friends she made, joining a music club with her friends, and even about a senior she was interested in. Her days seemed fulfilling and fun, which made me very happy. As the first semester was coming to an end, Emma nervously said,
"Hey, Mom, I have something to tell you."
It turned out to be a happy announcement.
I recently got a boyfriend.
Her boyfriend was Jason, the senior she was a bit interested in from her club. I replied, "That's great. Congratulations." But inwardly, I was a bit worried. After all, my daughter had inherited my supposed poor judgment in men. I was anxious about the possibility of her experiencing the same bad luck with men that I had. Sensing my concern, Emma asked,
"Can I bring him over to introduce him to you?"
I put on a cheerful tone and said, "Of course." During the summer break, Emma came home and brought her boyfriend Jason with her. When I finally met him, Jason turned out to be a well-groomed and pleasant young man.
Nice to meet you. I'm Jason, and I'm dating your daughter.
He said clearly, bowing his head as soon as I greeted him at the door. He seemed like a responsible young man, and I felt a wave of relief, thinking my worries might have been unfounded. Jason didn't have dyed hair or piercings, but he had a sophisticated air about him. His beauty mark was rather charming. I remembered how I used to be attracted to such people when I was Emma's age, and it made me feel oddly nostalgic. Then, while having tea with him and Emma, I found Jason to be not only responsible but also very considerate. He would promptly offer to help, saying,
I'll take that.
when I was serving tea, and he would discreetly refill my cup when it was empty. Jason is quite a nice guy, I whispered to Emma when Jason left the room for a moment.
"What do you mean, quite? Were you worried?"
Emma replied with a slightly embarrassed smile. Of course. After all, he's the man my daughter likes.
"Oh, come on, it's fine. I'm not like you, Mom,"
she said, and we both laughed together. Soon, the second semester began. Emma determined not to burden me and spent her days working part-time jobs to cover her living expenses. I sent her money each month just in case, but she seemed to be saving it for the future. Emma appeared to be very reliable at her workplace, balancing both her studies and part-time jobs to the point that she rarely attended her club activities anymore. Are you okay? Don't overdo it, and use the money I send you. If you want, I can come over and help with the housework. I worried and asked. Emma replied weakly,
"I'm fine. Since I stopped going to the club, Jason has been coming over often to check on me. You have your own things to worry about, Mom. I can manage on my own. I'm okay."
Really? If you say so,
"Just the other day,"
Emma said.
"I came back from work and found that Jason had surprised me by making hamburgers. They were really delicious. I have Jason, so I'll be fine.
Her cheerful tone made it clear how much she liked Jason. Then she added,
I have an early class tomorrow, so I have to go.
And hung up the phone. Despite my lingering worries, I reassured myself that Emma had Jason to support her. Emma continued to call to update me, but as she got busier, the frequency of her calls gradually decreased. When we did talk, she was still busy with her part-time job and classes. However, I couldn't help but notice her living conditions weren't great. She mentioned that Jason made sure she ate properly when he came over. But on other days, she was mostly eating bean soup. She was clearly struggling. Despite the substantial money I sent her each month, she didn't seem to be the type to waste money. When I mentioned this to my mother, she dismissed my concerns, saying,
"You're worrying too much about an independent daughter. You haven't let go yet."
Perhaps she was right. I might have been overly concerned. Emma would soon be 19. She was still a child to me, but in the eyes of the world, she was already an adult. Besides, Emma had the reliable Jason by her side. Maybe I needed to give her space unless she genuinely needed my help. I tried to calm my anxious heart. Winter break had arrived. When Emma came back home, she looked visibly thinner. She had always been slim, but her cheeks were sunken, and her waist was noticeably smaller at that time. Dark circles under her eyes suggested exhaustion. She explained that she had a late shift at work the night before and came home directly from there. "Aren't you overdoing it lately? Are you eating properly?" I asked.
I am eating properly. Bean soup and stuff.
She replied. "And stuff?" I prompted. Emma fell silent. Seeing my shocked expression, she tried to cover it up, saying,
But I've gotten really good at making bean soup.
Her earnestly smiling face seemed painfully forced. Could it be that she wasn't eating properly? Despite the fact that I sent her money every month and she worked hard at her job, why was this happening? I felt a sudden sense of unease. Emma's words seemed to confirm my suspicions.
Thank you for the $13 every month, Mom.
She said. $13? I've been sending $130 every month. I replied.
Huh?
Emma looked puzzled this time. A dreadful feeling began to swell in my chest. Emma, where do you keep your bank book and ATM card?
In the drawer of my desk at home.
Emma, I need you to let me into your house right now. There's something I need to check. Emma seemed taken aback by my abrupt request, but nodded in submission. On the train heading to Emma's apartment, I talked to her about various things. The first topic that, why did you think the allowance was $13? Emma explained that she had separate accounts, one for her earnings from work, which she used for daily expenses, and another for the allowance I sent her, which she considered as savings. With the start of the new semester, she had to buy textbooks and other necessities, which depleted her savings account. When she checked it recently, she found it only had $78 left. Although Emma felt that the balance was low, she couldn't recall touching the account for the past 6 months. While she knew I was sending her money, she never asked for a specific amount. So, when she saw $78, she assumed it was the total allowance for 6 months, which averaged out to $13 per month. Didn't you think it was too little? I asked.
I did, but I thought you were going through a tough time too.
Emma replied. Oh, come on, don't be silly. Do you think I'm not making any money? Don't underestimate me. I joked, trying to lighten the mood. Emma finally seemed to relax a bit, but her expression quickly darkened again. And it was no wonder. If Emma hadn't touched her allowance at all, it meant that someone had been withdrawing money from her account without her knowledge. The most suspicious person in this scenario was Jason, since he had frequently visited her apartment. Emma seemed unwilling to admit it. I didn't want to believe that the charming young man, let alone Emma's boyfriend, could be involved in stealing money. With a racing heart, I eagerly waited for the train to reach the nearest station. As soon as we arrived at Emma's apartment, we grabbed her cash card and hurried to the nearest ATM. The bank would close in the evening, and the sun was already setting, so time was of the essence. We slid the bank book into the ATM machine and waited for the transaction to be recorded. As we looked at the numbers printed on the bank book that was spit out, we both held our breath. $130 was indeed deposited every month, but there were signs of frequent withdrawals. Emma turned pale and whispered,
Why?
I took Emma to a cafe since she looked like she might collapse at any moment, and decided to delve deeper into the situation. Primarily, I wanted to understand how she managed her bank book. Emma mentioned that she kept her cash card in a drawer with a lock on her desk. However, since the key was in a different drawer, it was entirely possible to access it if someone entered the house. The only person who could rummage through the room in Emma's absence was her boyfriend, Jason, who had a spare key. Furthermore, the PIN was the same as Emma's usual card, suggesting it might have been observed when she withdrew money. Perhaps she was also careless when she opened the account. I'm sorry. I didn't think about it carefully enough. I never imagined it would be used by someone else. I apologized.
You don't have to apologize, Mom. It's my fault for not being vigilant enough with the management.
Emma replied. Both of us lowered our heads. But I began. The worst offender is the person who unlawfully used someone else's money. I continued.
Yeah.
Emma's reply lacked energy. It was understandable. To be betrayed in this manner by the person she trusted the most. Seeing my daughter disheartened pained my heart. I'll handle this matter, I found myself saying.
Huh?
Emma was taken aback. I know you might not want to deal with it, but this is a serious crime. We need to gather evidence and report it to the police. I explained.
What? Police?
Emma's voice trembled with agitation. Yes, it's that serious. Don't worry. I'll take care of it. It's to ensure you can continue your university life without worries, okay? I reassured. Emma hesitated, then nodded slightly. Sometime later, I visited a certain detective agency. I had relied on them during the investigation of my husband's infidelity. I need you to investigate my daughter's boyfriend. His name is Jason, a sophomore in the economics department at the same university as my daughter. He might have been using the allowance I sent to my daughter without permission. I explained, showing them the photos Emma had sent me. They readily accepted the case. The fee was not trivial, but it was all for the sake of clarifying the truth, for Emma's sake. While waiting for the investigation, at Emma's anxious suggestion, she started commuting to school from my house. The commute took over an hour each way, so it seemed like a hassle, but Emma visibly relaxed when I returned home. Once, she even made bean soup as a side dish for dinner.
"I've gotten good at bean soup,"
she said one day. And indeed, the bean soup she made were rich and delicious. As my heart ached, knowing she must have been making them every day, Emma winked confidently at me. And then, a month later, the results of the investigation came in. It seemed undeniable that Jason had been withdrawing money from Emma's account. According to the information gathered, Jason's lifestyle suddenly improved after he started dating Emma, as testified by his friends. Surprisingly, Jason's wrongdoing didn't end there. He appeared to be involved with multiple other women. As I was left speechless, several photos were handed to me. Photos of Jason arm in arm with different women, happily dining at restaurants, peering into arcades together, and strolling through the hotel district. In each photo, the same man with distinctive freckles on his face appeared, unmistakably Jason. The detective solemnly informed me.
It seems Jason has been stealing your daughter's allowance to maintain a lavish lifestyle not only for his friends but also for multiple other girlfriends.
I thanked the detective profusely and bowed deeply. Now, it was time to launch our counterattack. First, I filed a police report. Then, I sent written statements to Jason's parents, his university, and all the girlfriends he was involved with, detailing his actions. Initially, Jason seemed defiant, but after being confronted by multiple girlfriends, he finally confessed to his crimes. All the girlfriends, including Emma, naturally cut ties with Jason. Subsequently, Jason faced expulsion from his university due to the police involvement and was taken back home by his parents. Fortunately, his parents were sensible people who came to our house once with a gift to apologize. For the stolen money, his parents agreed to repay it for the time being. Jason's father even went as far as to kneel down and apologize, saying,
"I'll make sure my idiot son pays it back even if it costs his life."
According to hearsay Emma heard, Jason was working multiple jobs to repay his parents. As things settled down, it was just the beginning of spring. To celebrate cutting ties with the bad influence and Emma's spring break, we went on a trip for the first time in a year. Since then, Emma seemed to have gotten her life back on track, with her skin glowing and her body looking healthier. We soaked in warm baths together, indulged in delicious hotel meals, and watched TV. It felt like we were finally having some peaceful time after a long while.
"Mom."
Emma spoke up from her bed just before sleep. "What is it?" I asked.
"Didn't Dad's wastefulness and infidelity lead to your divorce?"
she asked. Emma's words made me snap back to reality. My ex-husband was like Jason and spent money recklessly just to impress others. Because of that, he stopped providing for the household, and on top of that, he cheated on me, which led to me serving him with divorce papers.
"We seem to have chosen similar kinds of men, haven't we?"
Emma said with a slightly sad smile. "Yeah, we'll have to be more careful from now on," I replied with a deliberately bright tone, feeling a bit uneasy.
"Come to think of it, Mom, you seem to be in high spirits lately. Do you have a boyfriend or something?"
Emma asked. "No way. I don't have a boyfriend yet," I replied.
"Could it be that you're about to get one?"
she teased. I haven't told Emma yet that I'd been getting along quite well with the investigator assigned to the case ever since the incident. Yet, she seems to have noticed. Is it a woman's intuition at work? Or perhaps it's because we'd been together for so long as mother and daughter?
Hey, Mom, what's up? Are you okay this time?
Emma pokes me, laughing. I think so. He seems responsible and dependable, unlike your father. I reply, a bit flustered.
Oh, come on, Mom. You better be careful this time. It wouldn't be funny if you ended up like me next.
Emma chuckles. Right. I'll be careful, I said, trying to sound composed, and exchanged a smile with Emma.